What's up guys, MizzoFrizzo here, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to set up a damage indicator, much like you'll find in Fortnite. So as you can see here, when I fire, my weapon's drawing a line trace, and whatever enemy I hit, we're spawning a nice little damage indicator. And just as a bonus, I'm going to show you guys how to add a little bit of randomness to where it floats off to. And you can also choose, where it floats off to in regards to the player. So as you can see here, if I go around to the other side of this enemy, it's still going to float up and to the right, no matter where I fire from. So without further ado, let me show you how to do this. Alrighty guys, now what we're going to be setting up today is a little bit more advanced than what you might see in other tutorials on the same subject, but I see absolutely no reason why anyone can't follow along and set this up exactly like I do, because I'm going to show you exactly how to set all of it up, including getting our characters up and right vectors so that we know sort of where to set that floating away position as, if that makes any sense. Alrighty, so the first thing we're going to do is create a widget that will display the amount of damage. But just before we do that, we are going to create a blueprint interface. If you don't know what a blueprint interface is, it's basically an alternative to casting, which is much more performant because casting creates a permanent reference, and we don't want to get into the habit of creating those permanent references, especially in blueprints that are only going to exist for half a second before we destroy them. We want to use blueprint interfaces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and go to blueprint interface, and I'm going to call this BPI underscore damage ind for indicator. This is going to interact with our interface with our damage indicator to set the amount of damage. So all we need to do is open this up, and I'm going to rename the function if underscore set damage, and I'm going to give it one input, call it damage of type float. And we're going to add this to our damage indicator widget shortly, so you'll see how this works. But basically we're going to pass through a damage amount to the widget when it's spawned. So I'm going to close this now, and I'm going to right click and go to user interface and widget blueprint, user widget, and I'm going to call this w underscore damage ind for damage indicator. Okay, I'm going to open this up, and straight away here in the palette I'm going to search for canvas panel, drag out a canvas panel. I'm also going to grab text and drag it onto the canvas panel here, and with the text selected I'm going to change the anchor to center. I'm going to zero out the position X and the position Y, and I'm going to change the alignment to 0.5, 0.5, check size to content, and justification align text center. So this will make sure it's in the middle of the screen. You can change a bunch of other stuff here. You could change the font size and spacing. You could skew it. You could do whatever you like here, but I'm basically going to leave it as it is. I'm just going to change the color to yellow to make it stand out a little bit more, like so. And now let's add an animation to this piece of text. So with the text selected here, you want to add an animation here. And if you don't have this animations window, what you want to do is click window down here and find animations, add this animations window. I'm going to add an animation. I'm just going to call it anim. And then with the text box selected and the animation selected, I'm going to add a new track. And this is going to be the element of this widget that you want to animate. So for me, it's going to be just this text block. See, it says here text block 75. That's this one here. And then I'm going to click this add track. And under rendering here, I'm going to add a render opacity track. Okay, I can now drag this out for as long as I want the animation to be. So let's make it 1 second long, just so it stands out. I would make this a bit shorter personally. I would make it maybe half a second long, but let's just make it 1 second for the purposes of this tutorial. And what I'm going to do at time 0 here is change the render opacity to 0 and make sure that that keyframes. And then I'm going to go to say 0.2 of a second, and make the render opacity at 0.2 of a second 1. So this will be totally visible. I'm going to go to 0.75 here and add another keyframe at render opacity 1, and then I'm going to go to 1 second and change this back to 0. And if I click off here so it doesn't show the anchor there, which gets in the way a little bit, we can see that it's fading in, it's staying there for about half a second, and then it's fading out. What we can do to make this, give this a little bit more depth and look a bit nicer, is also change the scale of it. So you can add a track here of varying different tracks that will set the the font and transform and blah blah blah, all this stuff. Another way of adding a track is you can select the animation here, you've got the element selected, and you can search in the details panel for what you want to change. Let's say scale, and I can use this icon here to add a keyframe. So what I'm going to do at time 0 is I'm going to make the size 0.5 and 0.5 and add a keyframe here. So it's added the track and a keyframe. And then what we can do is go out to, say, here, 1/4 of a second, and make this 1 and 1 and add another keyframe. And then I'm going to go to the end and I'm going to set this to 0.8 and 0.8 and add one more keyframe. If I unselect this to get rid of the anchor and then move the slider, you'll see it's fading in and increasing in scale. So it comes in, boom, and then it starts fading away immediately and then dissolves like so. So that looks pretty nice. You can play with this and you can add keyframes for other stuff, whatever you're trying to achieve. You can set it all up in here, but just for the purposes of this tutorial, this looks good to me. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is create a binding so that this text knows, it's bound to a certain input. So we can select the text, and over here in content text, you can click on bind and create binding. And then I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it damage of type float. And I'm going to drag that out, plug it into the return value right here. And this just exposes this as a variable, which we're going to set later on in the blueprint that we create. So this is all we need to do here, but just before we close this damage indicator widget, the last thing we need to do is go to the event graph. We can delete event construct and event tick. We just need event pre-construct. We're going to grab this animation, and off of that we're going to play animation forward like so. And we also need to click on the class settings here, and down here in interfaces we're going to add the BPI damage end that we created earlier, BPI damage end, and then up here in interfaces you'll see if set damage, the function that we created in that interface. You can either right click on that and implement event, or you can simply double click on it and it will spawn this node here, event if set damage. So we're going to call this later on to set the damage amount of this widget, but all we need to do in here is call this event and then grab our damage here. I'm going to alt click and drag that out to set damage, and we're going to set damage as this damage that we're going to pass over from our other blueprint. So that is absolutely everything that we need to do in here in the widget. We can compile, save, and close that. While we're here, we might create the blueprint interface that will get the vectors of our character so that we have the position. So very quickly, I'm going to right click, go to blueprint, blueprint interface. I'm going to call this BPI underscore player, because this is going to interface with our player character. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to rename the function if underscore get vectors, like so, if underscore get vectors. I'm going to add an output. I'm going to call it up vector of type vector, and add one more. call it right vector of type vector. And that's all we need to do in here. We can compile, save, and close that. And now what we're going to do is create a blueprint that we will spawn when the enemy is hit, and it's going to contain this this widget that we've created. So I'm going to right click, go to blueprint class. I'm going to create an actor, and I'm going to call it BP underscore damage int. BP underscore damage int. I'm going to open this up, and the first thing I'm going to do is add a component. It's going to be a widget component. Whoops, widget, and I'm just going to call it damage widget. And then with it selected, over here you can find widget class, and you can select the W underscore damage int that we've created, and there it is. Now this is going to have its own location and rotation, so this could potentially be facing away from the character or to the side and would be very hard to see. So what we're going to do here is in user interface and space, we're going to select screen. Now this will disappear when we select screen, but that's okay. It just means that it's going to be facing our player wherever they are. Okay. So that's all we need to do in the viewport. We can go to the event graph and we can delete these two nodes. We only need event begin play. And what we're going to do on event begin play is set the damage of that widget. So this is where the blueprint interface comes in. What we need to do is drag this damage widget out and get widget. So this is getting this specific widget right here, W damage int, and then from there what we can do is call our interface function set damage, like so. And we also need to give this blueprint a variable that we can set when we spawn this blueprint. So I'm going to drag off of damage here and promote to variable, and I'm just going to leave it as damage. But I'm going to select it, and over here I'm going to check instance editable and expose on spawn. So when we spawn this blueprint, we can set the damage. Okay, you'll see what I mean shortly. So the next thing we need to do is set up the sort of floating away movement of our little damage indicator widget. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the actor location. Get actor location. I'm going to promote this to a variable. I'm going to call it start pos for start position. Okay. And I am also going to we need to add the blueprint interface to our character. So very quickly I'm going to go to my character, and you can see I've got two third-person characters here. Basically one is my player and one is a copy that I made to make this enemy right here. So this is just a copy of my third person character. I'm going to open up my player character, and I've got a bunch of logic here from other tutorials, but basically I'm just going to be working with this line trace right here. So I'm not going to be showing you how to draw a line trace in this tutorial. There's plenty of tutorials out there on how to do it, including one of my own. But basically, when I fire my gun, I'm just calling a line trace here. It's drawing from my weapon's barrel, and then I'm checking if I've hit anything, and I'm breaking the result. And we're gonna do an apply damage node to sort of pass the damage over to our enemy, which is going to spawn the damage indicator blueprint. But for now, all I'm going to do in my player character blueprint here is go to class settings, and in interfaces over here I'm going to add my BPI player blueprint interface. If I compile now and look at interfaces over here, you'll see the IF get vectors that we created. We can double click that and open this up, and you'll see it's got these which will output wherever we call it. And all we need to do is get our actor rotation, and then from rotation we can get the up vector and get the right vector. and I'm going to plug these in here like so, compile and save. And now if we go back to our damage indicator blueprint, what I can do is then call my getVectors interface function, so if getVectors message, and the target is going to be the player character, so we can get player character like so. And now whenever this blueprint is spawned, it will know where our character is facing. Basically, it will have an up vector, which is a 1 centimeter long vector going straight up from the player character, and a vector to the right. So this will allow us to set the position of our little damage indicator widget as it spawns in, does its little animation. So what we're going to do is grab the start position here, and I'm going to add the up vector and the right vector multiplied. So I'm going to add another pin to this addition node. I'm going to plug these both in here. I'm going to right click on each of them and convert it to a float, single precision. So as I said, these vectors are 1 centimeter long, so we can multiply them by however many centimeters we want our widget to move. And I'm going to add a little bit of randomness to this to make it look nice. So I'm going to find a random float in range. I'm going to duplicate that, plug this one in here. So this is the range at which it will float up, and this is the range at which it will float off to the right. So up, I'm going to make this 40 to 50, something like that. So 40 to 50 centimeters up, it will float. And off to the right, let's make this 20 to 30 centimeters like so. And then I'm going to, off this addition node, promote to variable, and this will be our end position. Okay. So now that we have a start position and a little bit of randomness added to our start position to find the end position, we now need to set this position, and we're going to set it using a timeline. So off of end position here, I can add a timeline. I'm just going to leave it named timeline. I'm going to double click on the timeline and add a float track here, add float track, and I'm going to make it just longer than our little animation on our widget. So I'm going to make this 1.1 because our animation was 1 second long. I'm going to make this a little bit longer just so that the widget doesn't stop moving while you can still see it. I'm going to hold shift and click twice to add 2 points on this float track. I'm going to select the first one and change the time to 0 and the value to 0. I'm going to select the second one, and I'm going to change the time to our maximum time, so the length of the float track, 1.1, and the value to 1. You can click these icons here to fit to screen, and if you like, you could smooth this out by right-clicking and selecting auto, and it will smooth it out like so. You know, you could do some different stuff with this. You could make it come in nice and steep, so it starts moving fast and ends moving quite slow. Let's leave it like that for a bit of dramatic effect. So that's this timeline setup. We can close the timeline tab, and now we've got this little float output right here, which is going to go from 0 to 1, and we can use that as an alpha on a lerp node. So we can find lerp vector, and then off of the return value, I'm going to set the actor location off of update, and I'm going to grab my start position and my end position, and that's what it's going to lerp between start position A and position B, like so. And then when this is finished, what we want to do is destroy actor, like so. That is everything set up in here. So like I said, this is a little bit more advanced. We've got some randomness here, and we've got our characters up and right vectors added in so that it always goes right and up. But I'm pretty sure this should be easily enough followed along. So with that all done, let's close this and let's have a look in our player character. So here I've got my line trace logic like so. And what I want to do off of my break hit result here is get my hit actor and apply damage. So if you aren't familiar with this node, apply damage or apply point damage, this is very nifty function built in to Unreal, which passes information to a hit actor and applies damage. So I'm going to make this base damage 20. Okay, and the damage type class is just going to be my default damage type, like so. So now, if I line trace and I hit an enemy, it's going to pass over this apply damage, and what I can do is I can open up my enemy's blueprint and I can find a node called event any damage. This is what's going to be triggered when it's hit, and what we can do is spawn actor from class and select my BP damage indicator, BP damage end right here, and I'm going to right click on the transform and split struct pin, and where I'm going to get this to spawn is just up and to the right of my enemy's neck bone so that it appears over his shoulder. So how we're going to do that is on event any damage, what we can do is call that if get vectors again, and off target get the player character like so. I can also get this enemy's neck bone, so I'm going to drag the mesh out and I'm going to get socket location, and the socket location I'm going to get is neck _02. So this is going to get the location of his second neck bone, and then I'm going to add to that and add a pin to this addition node, and I'm going to again add the up and right vectors multiplied by a single precision float. So I'm going to plug both of those in there and right click, float single precision, float single precision, and I'm just going to make this 20 and 20. So this damage indicator blueprint is always going to spawn 20 centimeters to your player's right and above this enemy's neck bone. Alrighty, and damage here we can plug into damage right here. If you haven't got this right here, it's because you missed the step where we made that variable exposed on spawn and instance editable. That's what makes this appear here. So every time we spawn the blueprint, we can set that variable right there. Alrighty, now that's all set up and ready to go. If I hit play here, I can shoot this enemy, and it's spawning my little damage indicator, floating up and to the right and fading away. Very nice. Guys, as a bonus here, I'm going to show you how to set up a different amount of damage for a headshot, so that when we shoot him in the head, it says 50 damage. Okay, so what we need to do is first open up the project settings. So up here, settings, project settings, and then you can search for surface, and you've got these surface types here. I'm going to create a couple of custom ones. I'm going to call this one headshot, and I'm going to call the other one body shot. Okay, I'm going to close that. That's all I need to do in there. And then what I need to do is right click and go to physics and physical material right here, and it's just going to be a physical material. Select, and I'm going to call this physical material underscore head. I am going to duplicate it, and I'm going to call the other one physmat underscore body. I'm going to open up physmat head, and then here in surface type, I'm going to change that to headshot, which we created in the project settings. Save and close that. I'm going to open up FizzMat body and surface type, change that to body shot. Save and close that. And now what we need to do is find the physics asset that this enemy character is using. So here we've got its blueprint. If I select the body, you'll see the skeletal mesh asset over here, SKM many. I can browse to that, and then I can open that. And then over here in the details panel, if I scroll down, you'll see physics asset, and it's using physics asset underscore mannequin. I can then browse to that and open that. And here we have the physics asset of our mannequin. What I can do is I can select this bubble on his head. It's called a shape. And over here in Fizz Material Override, I can click that and find my physical material head, FizzMat head that we created. And I can also over here, I can shift click to select all of these shapes and then control click to unselect the head. And I'm going to change the physical material override on all of the other shapes except for the head. I'm going to find my FizzMat body and then save and close that. And then in my character's blueprint where I've got my line trace logic right here, what I can do is drag off of FizzMat and get surface type. Off of surface type, I can switch on E physical surface. And then I'm going to copy my apply damage node here. I'm going to plug one into headshot and one into body shot. And actually, default, I am also going to plug into the same one as body shot, because if for some reason we hit this enemy but we don't proc this physical material surface type, we want it to just do the standard amount of damage. What I can do is make sure that I plug hit actor into the damage actor on both of these applied damage nodes, and then on the headshot one, let's make this one 50, like so. And now if I hit play, I've got 20, 20, 20, and if I shoot him in the head, it says 50. Nice. So that's working as expected. Guys, that's all we set out to do today. If this cheat has been of any use or value to you whatsoever, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.